This story does not begin with love. It begins with a warning, long before the engagement announcement, long before the wedding, long before the world was invited to believe a modern fairy tale had rewritten royal history. British intelligence had already reached a conclusion, not a suspicion, not a rumor, a formal assessment. There are certain names that are never meant to return once they disappear behind sealed doors. Names that exist only in restricted files, internal briefings, and conversations spoken carefully, if at all. Ghislaine Maxwell is one of those names. And when a name like that resurfaces, not tied to the past, but intersecting with a future that already unfolded, it alters how everything must be understood. Because this is not a story about gossip. It is not about hindsight. It is about what was known in advance, what was written down with precision, and what was consciously set aside. And once you understand what was inside that file, the devastation no longer looks accidental. In October of 2016, deep within Britain's domestic intelligence apparatus, a briefing was finalized that the public was never meant to see. It did not originate from tabloids or palace chatter. It came from the division responsible for protecting the royal household itself. The trigger was procedural, not emotional. Prince Harry had entered a confirmed romantic relationship with an American actress named Meghan Markle. The pace alone raised concern. 3 in-person meetings in 8 weeks, 1 overseas. That was sufficient to activate a standing protocol established in 1998, requiring mandatory vetting of any foreign national entering proximity to the crown. This was not optional, it was automatic. The resulting briefing was classified at a Delta level, a compartment so restricted it was reserved for only a handful of individuals: the Queen, the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, and the Director General of MI5. The internal description attached to the file was unusually direct. From its opening pages, the message was clear. This was not a routine background check. It was a warning. Inside intelligence services, concern is graded carefully. Category Red sits at the highest tier. It does not mean inconvenient. It does not mean controversial. It means high risk, with the potential to cause damage that spreads outward and cannot easily be contained. Meghan Markle was classified as a Category Red personality risk. The language was exact. Left unmitigated, she presented a credible capacity to inflict strategic-level reputational damage on the monarchy within a projected window of 36 to 60 months. Not years, months. The recommendation that followed was equally explicit. She should not be cleared for formal integration into the royal family. This assessment was not moral. It did not judge intentions or emotions. Intelligence services do not evaluate love. They evaluate patterns, leverage, and impact, and what they identified was a trajectory they had seen before. To explain the severity of the warning, the file turned to psychological analysis. Years prior to meeting Prince Harry, Meghan Markle had consulted a psychiatric practice in Los Angeles. During the vetting process, this information became part of a covert psychological profile compiled between 2014 and 2015. The findings were clinical, not sensational. The assessment identified cluster B personality traits, with pronounced narcissistic and histrionic features scoring in the 89th percentile. But the label itself was not the concern. The pattern was. Across personal relationships, analysts identified a recurring cycle: idealization, devaluation, discard. 7 former close friendships were cited, along with 1 former partner. The endings were not gradual. They were abrupt, often triggered by perceived slights or loss of admiration. Subversive admiration. The profile described an unusually intense need for external validation, paired with extreme sensitivity to criticism. In plain terms, someone who thrived under attention and escalated sharply when that attention wavered. For intelligence analysts, a map of how pressure would be handled when it inevitably arrived, and according to the file, pressure was inevitable. The next section addressed an area intelligence services treat with particular caution: financial opacity. Not wealth, not success, but lack of transparency. In 2013, Meghan Markle incorporated an offshore entity in the British Virgin Islands. The company received acting residuals and endorsement income. On its own, this was not illegal, but offshore structures obscure visibility, and obscured visibility is risk. More troubling was what followed. In March of 2016, a cash deposit totaling $450,000 appeared in a Toronto bank account linked to Meghan Markle. The source was undocumented. Canadian financial authorities flagged the transaction. The Toronto Police Financial Crimes Unit opened an inquiry. Then the investigation ended abruptly. The closure followed a single phone call from the United States Embassy press attaché. No explanation was recorded, no source identified. The funds remained unexplained. For MI5 analysts, this was not evidence of wrongdoing, but it was evidence of intervention. An intervention without transparency is a risk category of its own. From there, the briefing widened its scope. Intelligence assessments rarely isolate individuals. They examine networks. Who grants access? Who opens doors quietly? Doors quietly. Meghan Markle was identified as a frequent attendee at private social gatherings hosted through Soho House. These were not casual events. They were curated environments where cultural figures, political aides, and international operators intersected under the banner of lifestyle exclusivity. One facilitator noted in the files specialized in arranging introductions as part of cultural diplomacy initiatives. In plain terms, these were rooms where influence moved without leaving fingerprints. The briefing also documented sustained correspondence with Jessica Mulroney. The relationship itself was not flagged as problematic. The proximity was. Mulroney's family connections intersected with a Commonwealth Development Organization that had received discrete pass-through funding linked to the U.S. State Department. Timing added weight. In May of 2016, Meghan Markle attended a private dinner in Toronto with a senior political aide closely tied to Canada's Prime Minister. That same week, she publicly hinted at relocating to London for love. MI5 did not label this coordination. It labeled it alignment. And repeated alignment stops looking coincidental. The final layer of concern centered on narrative control. Between 2013 and 2015, Meghan Markle acquired 47 aged Twitter accounts, each with established follower bases ranging from 20,000 to 80,000 users. At the time of assessment, all accounts were dormant. To intelligence analysts, dormant does not mean inactive. It means reserved. Even more revealing was her decision to retain a crisis public relations firm in January of 2016, 6 months before meeting Prince Harry. The firm specialized in managing reputational crises for high-profile clients. It operated on a standing monthly retainer. This was not reaction, it was preparation. The briefing made no claim that these tools had been misused. It stated something more important. Long before royal life began, the infrastructure to manage global conflict had already been assembled. By the time palace staff began preparing her for public exposure, she had already prepared herself. Then came a detail that quietly collapsed the narrative of coincidence. In November of 2015, nearly a year before the relationship became public, Meghan Markle initiated a private Instagram exchange with a member of Prince Harry's protection team. The message was casual, hypothetical. She asked how difficult it might be to arrange a private introduction. The officer declined. The exchange ended there. It was not escalated at the time. It resurfaced later during a separate phone seizure and was logged into the intelligence record. No accusation attached, no motive assigned. It was simply noted. In October of 2016, MI5 finalized what it called a threat forecast. It did not speculate. It outlined sequence. First would come a surge of positive media coverage. Meghan Markle would be framed as a modernizing force, a symbol of progress, a refreshing presence inside an ancient institution. That phase would last 18 to 24 months. Then, the tone would change. Behind the scenes, staff complaints would begin quietly, then multiply. Analysts noted early echoes of this pattern in testimonies from prior television production crews. As pressure increased, the forecast warned of a strategic shift toward identity-based narratives, particularly the selective foregrounding of race. The final phase offered two likely outcomes: a global personal scandal or a managed separation that preserved titles while converting status into commercial leverage. The recommendation was restrained, introduce administrative friction, slow the relationship until interest cooled. None of it was followed. The Delta briefing was delivered to the Queen in November of 2016. Her private secretary received it with handwritten notes in the margin. Years later, after his retirement, one sentence from those notes would surface. My grandson is lonely. One cannot vet for love. 5 forces converge to override the file. History weighed heavily. The institution still carried the shadow of 1997. The Queen was determined not to repeat what she believed had driven Diana away. Emotion followed. In a private audience, Prince Harry reportedly delivered a quiet ultimatum. Politics intervened. Britain stood on the edge of Brexit. Senior officials believed a glamorous biracial American duchess could stabilize Commonwealth optics. Belief endured. The crown had absorbed outsiders before, and finally there was a wager. Time, duty, children. The institution would reshape her. In January of 2017, a compromise was reached. A prenuptial agreement was embedded discreetly into royal consent. Financial settlements were capped. Tell-all interviews in the United States were restricted for 15 years. In exchange, the wedding proceeded. Intelligence services were instructed not to disengage, but to observe. Permanent technical coverage was authorized. Terabytes of data would accumulate in secure government facilities. The file was sealed. The wedding was celebrated. And within 3 years, the monarchy was bleeding legitimacy across multiple realms. Prince Harry was estranged. Meghan Markle was in California with 2 titled children and the permanent ability to dominate global headlines. In 2021, the Delta compartment that once held the warning was quietly renamed. Lesson learned. But inside Windsor Castle, in a locked drawer, the Queen kept a photograph on her desk until her final days. It showed Harry and Meghan on the palace balcony in 2018, both smiling, both believing the ending would be different. On the back, written in her own hand, were 4 words. I should have listened. And this is where the story pauses. Not because the file is finished, but because the consequences are still unfolding.